The first time Aisha saw the red light glowing from the window of the roadside bar, she felt her stomach twist like a rope pulled too tight. The air smelled of cheap beer and roasted suya. It was evening in Ibadan, and Bodija market was just closing. Hawkers were packing their goods, downfall buses were still shouting for passengers, and tired workers were hurrying home. For everyone else, the day was ending. But for Aisha, her night of pain was just beginning. Aisha was only 19, yet her face already looked older than her years. Her skin was smooth and dark, but her eyes carried the heaviness of someone who had seen too much. She grew up in Saki, a small town in Oyo State, where life had been hard but still filled with some kind of innocence. Her father had died when she was 14, leaving her mother with 4 children and nothing but a small farm. Her mother struggled to feed them. Hunger became their closest companion, and poverty followed like a shadow that refused to leave. When Aisha turned 16, a neighbor convinced her mother to let her go to Ibadan to work as a housemaid. The neighbor promised that the family in Ibadan would treat her well, pay her monthly, and allow her to send money home. At first, things seemed fine. But the family soon began to treat her badly. She washed clothes from morning till night, cleaned, cooked, and never received a single salary. Instead, they shouted at her, called her names, and beat her whenever she made a mistake. One night, when she could not take the insult anymore, she packed a small nylon bag that carried her 2 clothes and left the house. She had nowhere to go, but the streets of Ibadan became her new shelter. At first, she begged around Bodija and Gate area, looking for small change to buy food. Life was cruel, but she was still free. Then came the night everything changed. Aisha had been standing near a kiosk by Iwo Road, hungry and weak. A flashy car stopped beside her. The tinted glass rolled down, and a woman with heavy makeup smiled at her. The woman was dressed in a short gown that glittered under the streetlight. She asked Aisha why she was standing alone so late. Aisha explained her story with trembling lips. The woman nodded as if she understood. She offered her food and a place to sleep, and for the first time in weeks, Aisha felt a little hope. That woman's name was Mama Stella. But Mama Stella was no savior. She was a madam who recruited desperate girls for prostitution. The first night in Mama Stella's small house at Dugby, Aisha ate jollof rice and fried fish until she was full. She slept on a bed instead of the cold concrete floor. She thought maybe God had finally remembered her. But the next day, Mama Stella told her the truth. "You can't stay here for free," she said, her voice sharp. "Every girl here works. That is how you will eat, how you will sleep, and how you will survive." Aisha did not understand at first. But when she saw the other girls dressed in short skirts, painting their faces, and standing by the roadside at night, her heart began to pound. She shook her head, begged Mama Stella to allow her to do another kind of work. Anything. She said she could wash clothes, cook, or even sweep for the girls. Mama Stella slapped her so hard her ears rang. "You will do as I say. Do you think money falls from the sky? If you don't work, you don't eat." That night, they pushed Aisha into a skimpy dress and high heels. She cried until her throat was sore, but nobody cared. The streets of Ibadan at night were a different world. Bright lights from beer parlors mixed with darkness of broken street lamps. Men in expensive cars slowed down to talk to the girls. Some men staggered out of clubs drunk, their pockets heavy with cash, their eyes hungry for flesh. Aisha stood frozen by the roadside. Her tears smeared her makeup. The first man who approached her looked old enough to be her father. She tried to run, but Mama Stella's boys were watching from a distance. They threatened her with blows if she refused. That was the night her innocence was taken. That was the night she lost the last piece of herself. From then on, Aisha's life became a nightmare she could not wake up from. Every evening, she stood by the road with the other girls, waiting for men who saw them as nothing more than a body to use. Some men were rough, some were cruel, some refused to pay. And whenever Aisha tried to resist, Mama Stella beat her or locked her in a room without food. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Aisha became a shadow of herself. She hated her life, but she had no way out. She tried to escape once, but Mama Stella's boys caught her and dragged her back. The punishment left her body bruised and her spirit broken. Still, deep in her heart, she prayed every night. She prayed that one day someone would see her not as a prostitute but as a human being. She prayed for freedom. And then came the night she met Mr. Kunle. It was raining heavily in Ibadan that evening. The girls were reluctant to go out, but Mama Stella shouted at them to find money or else. Aisha stood shivering under a broken umbrella by a lonely corner near Secretariat Road. A black Toyota Corolla stopped in front of her. She thought it was another customer, but when the window rolled down, she saw a man who looked different from the usual kind. He wore glasses, his shirt neat, his voice calm. He asked her name. She gave him a fake one, the one Mama Stella told them to use. But the man did not ask her to get into the car. Instead, he asked her why she was standing in the rain. Something about his eyes made her want to tell the truth. Something in his voice made her feel safe for the first time in years. She did not know that this man, Mr. Kunle, was about to change her life forever. That night, as the rain fell harder and the city lights blurred through the water, Aisha's story began to take a new turn. The rain poured so heavily that night, drumming against the roof of the nearby shops and splashing into dirty puddles on the road. Aisha stood, shivering, her dress clinging to her slim body. Most men who usually stopped for her had already rushed into clubs, hotels, or their cars to escape the downpour. She hugged herself and wondered if she would go home without making money. If she did, Mama Stella would beat her again. When the black Toyota Corolla stopped, her heart jumped. She expected the same routine, a man rolling down his window, bargaining, and then demanding she follow him. But this time it was different. The driver leaned over and spoke through the window. "Good evening. You will catch a cold standing here." His voice was calm, gentle, almost fatherly. Aisha lowered her eyes and said nothing. She had been trained not to trust strangers, especially men who spoke softly. Sometimes, those were the worst. "What is your name?" he asked again. She hesitated. The fake name rose to her lips blessing, but she swallowed it back. Something about him made her want to tell the truth, but she feared the punishment if Mama Stella ever found out. "My name is Blessing," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. The man studied her face for a moment, then sighed. "You're too young for this life." "How old are you?" 19, she replied quickly, though her voice trembled. He nodded slowly, then asked, "Do you have a home?" The question cut her like a knife. Home. That word had become like a ghost to her, something she longed for but no longer had. Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. The man's name was Kunle. He worked as a civil servant in the Oyo State Secretariat, a middle-aged man in his 40s, unmarried, living quietly in Bodija. He had always driven past girls like Aisha, but that night, something pushed him to stop. Perhaps it was the rain, perhaps it was the look of helplessness in her eyes, or perhaps God himself wanted him to intervene. "Get into the car," he said softly. Aisha froze. Her heart began to race. If she entered his car without taking money, Mama Stella's boys would notice. They would accuse her of trying to escape. She glanced around, fear written all over her face. "What's wrong?" Kunle asked. "They are watching me," she whispered. "I can't just go." Kunle looked around but saw nothing except the dark shadows of the street. Yet he believed her. He could sense the fear in her trembling hands, in the way she kept glancing over her shoulder. He leaned closer. "Listen. I am not here to use you. I want to help. If you trust me, I can take you away from this life. But you must decide. Aisha's mind spun like a wheel. Could she trust him? What if he was lying? What if he was worse than the men she already knew? But something deep inside whispered that maybe, just maybe, this man was different. Still, she hesitated. And then she saw it, the shadow of one of Mama Stella's boys standing across the road, watching. Her blood ran cold. If she left, there would be consequences. I can't, she murmured, stepping back. Connor didn't press her. He reached into his dashboard, pulled out a small nylon bag, and held it out. Inside was food from a nearby restaurant: rice, beans, and meat wrapped neatly. Take this, he said. At least you will not sleep hungry tonight. Her eyes widened. Men usually throw money at her, not food. She stared at him, confused. Slowly, she took the bag, her hands shaking. I'll be around, Connor added gently. If you ever want help, look for me near the secretariat. Ask for Mr. Connor. People know me there. Then he drove off, leaving her standing in the rain with food in her hands and tears streaming down her face. That night, back at Mama Stella's house, Aisha hid the food and ate it secretly. She told the other girls that one of her customers had given it to her. Inside her heart, something had shifted. For the first time in years, she had met a man who didn't see her body as merchandise. But Mama Stella was not blind. The next day, one of her boys reported seeing Aisha speaking with a man in a car. Furious, Mama Stella dragged Aisha into a room and slapped her repeatedly. Who was that man? She demanded. Nobody, Aisha cried. He just asked for directions. Liar. Mama Stella hissed, her eyes burning with anger. If I catch you trying to escape, you will regret the day you were born. Aisha fell to the floor, her body aching, her spirit crushed again. But the thought of Connor's words, I want to help, stayed in her mind like a candle burning in darkness. For the next week, she lived in fear. Mama Stella watched her closely, sending her out to work every night. But secretly, Aisha began to look for a chance to see Connor again. That chance came on a quiet Wednesday afternoon. Mama Stella had sent her to buy provisions at Bodija Market. As she walked past the secretariat gate, her eyes darted around. And then, like fate, she saw him, Connor, stepping out of the gate with a file in his hand. Her heart raced. She froze, unsure if she should approach him. But when he spotted her, he walked straight toward her. You came, he said softly, almost surprised. Aisha's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do. They will kill me if I try to leave. Connor placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and kind. You don't have to go back there. Trust me. I will find a way. For the first time in years, Aisha allowed herself to hope. It was a fragile hope, like glass that could shatter at any moment. But it was hope nonetheless. As she walked back toward Mama Stella's house that day, clutching the provisions, she knew her life had reached a turning point. The question was, would she be strong enough to take the chance when it came? Connor could not sleep the night after he saw Aisha again. He lay on his bed in Bodija, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of distant motorcycles roaring through the streets. His mind kept returning to her face, the sadness in her eyes, the trembling in her voice. He had lived in Ibadan all his life, and he had seen girls like her on the roadside countless times, but something about Aisha was different. She was too young, too broken, too trapped. He knew he could not just walk away. But helping her would not be simple. Mama Stella was not just a woman running a few girls on the street. She was a powerful madam with connections to rough men, area boys, touts, and even some policemen who collected bribes to look the other way. Anyone who tried to interfere with risked getting hurt. Connor, a civil servant who lived quietly, had never fought such battles before. Yet his conscience told him he could not stand aside. He prayed that night for wisdom, asking God to show him how to set this girl free. Meanwhile, back in Mama Stella's house, Aisha sat in a corner, hugging her knees. The other girls were laughing, drinking, and painting their faces for the night. But Aisha could not join them. She kept hearing Kunle's words in her mind, "You don't have to go back there. Trust me." She wanted to trust him. But fear gripped her. She had seen what happened to another girl, Funmi, who once tried to run away. Mama Stella's boys dragged Funmi back and beat her until her face swelled like yam. After that, nobody dared to try again. Still, Aisha's spirit refused to die. She prayed silently every night, whispering under her breath while lying on the thin mattress in the corner. "God, if this man is truly sent by you, please help me. Please don't let me die here." A few days later, Kunle made his first move. He contacted an old friend, Inspector Bamadil, who worked with the Oyo State Police Command. Kunle trusted him, they had grown up in the same neighborhood. "Bamadil," Kunle said carefully as they sat in a small buka near Mokola, eating amla and yudu, "I know a young girl who is being forced into prostitution. She wants to leave, but the madam holding her is dangerous. I need your help." Bamadil frowned, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "My brother, do you know what you're saying? Those women are protected. Some officers even collect money from them. If I go there blindly, I could lose my job or worse." Kunle's heart sank. "So you're saying we should do nothing?" The inspector shook his head. "No, I'm saying we must be careful. Bring me evidence. Prove that this girl is underage and being held against her will. Then I can act. Without evidence, my hands are tied." Kunle nodded slowly. It was risky, but he knew he had to try. The following week, he found Aisha again near the secretariat. She had been sent on another errand, and as soon as she saw him, she pulled him aside. "Sir, they are watching me," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "If they find me talking to you again, they will kill me." Kunle spoke calmly. "I want to help you, but I need proof. Do you have anything that shows your age? A school ID? A birth certificate?" Aisha shook her head. "When I left home, I carried nothing. But maybe my mother still has my papers. She lives in Soki." Kunle's mind began to race. Soki was hours away from Ibadan. But if he could reach her mother, everything could change. "Can you give me directions to your mother's house?" he asked. Aisha hesitated, biting her lip. Trust was a heavy thing. If she gave him her mother's address and he betrayed her, everything would be over. But looking into his eyes, she felt something stir in her chest. Hope. She scribbled the details on a torn piece of paper and slipped it into his hand before quickly walking away. That night, Kunle drove to Soki. The road was long and rough, and rain made some parts slippery, but he pressed on. When he finally arrived at the small village, he found a mud house with a wick lantern glowing inside. A tired-looking woman opened the door. Her wrapper was faded, and her face carried the weight of many struggles. When Kunle introduced himself and mentioned Aisha, her eyes filled with tears. "My daughter," the woman whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought she was dead. We have not heard from her for 3 years." Kunle sat with her on a wooden stool, explaining everything. The woman shook her head in sorrow. She confirmed that Aisha was indeed 19, showing him an old birth certificate wrapped carefully in nylon. She gave it to him with trembling hands. "Please, save my daughter," she pleaded. "Bring her back to me. I have prayed every day for her return." Kunle promised he would. He tucked the birth certificate safely into his bag and began the journey back to Ibadan, his heart heavy but determined. Back in the city, trouble was brewing. One of Mama Stella's boys had noticed Aisha's growing distance. She no longer laughed with the other girls. She no longer fought for customers. And once or twice, she had disappeared for too long during errands. Suspicion grew. One evening, Mama Stella cornered her in the small sitting room. "Tell me the truth, girl," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Who is that man you keep meeting? Don't lie to me." Aisha's blood froze. She tried to shake her head, but her lips trembled. "Nobody, just someone I asked for direction." Mama Stella's hand shot out and gripped her chin painfully. "If I ever find out you're trying to betray me, you will wish you were never born." That night, Aisha cried silently on her mattress. She knew the walls were closing in. If Kunle didn't act fast, she would be trapped forever or worse. Meanwhile, Kunle arrived back in Ibadan with the birth certificate in his bag. He went straight to Inspector Bamadil and laid it on the table. "Here is your proof," Kunle said firmly. "Now, will you help me?" The inspector studied the document, then nodded slowly. "This changes things. But we must plan carefully. That woman won't give up easily." And so, in the heart of Ibadan, a quiet war was about to begin between one desperate young girl fighting for her freedom, a man determined to save her, and a madam who would rather destroy her than lose her grip. Aisha's chains were tightening, but help was finally on the way. The air in Ibadan that Friday night was heavy, as if the city itself sensed something was about to happen. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets damp, with the smell of wet dust and roasted maize drifting through the night. Bodija was alive with noise music from bars, the shout of bus conductors, and the honking of impatient taxi drivers. But beneath the ordinary city chaos, something unusual was being planned. In a dimly lit office inside the Oyo State Police Command, Inspector Bamadil leaned across the table toward Kunle. The birth certificate lay between them, the small piece of paper that could decide Aisha's fate. "We cannot storm Mama Stella's place without preparation," Bamadil said. "She has boys. They won't just fold their arms. If we make noise, she will move the girl before we get there." Kunle's jaw tightened. "So what do you suggest?" The inspector rubbed his chin. "We need evidence that she is holding underage girls against their will. Once we have that, I can get a court order and go in with a team. But we must be smart. You can't just walk into her house. She will smell suspicion." Kunle sighed. He was a man used to paperwork and quiet routines, not secret missions. But he had already crossed the line of comfort the moment he decided to save Aisha. There was no turning back now. Meanwhile, Aisha sat in Mama Stella's sitting room, staring blankly at the television. The other girls laughed at a Nollywood movie, but she was lost in thought. Her body carried bruises from the last time Mama Stella slapped her, but her spirit clung to hope. She kept replaying Kunle's words in her mind, "I will find a way." That night, Mama Stella called her into the bedroom. The woman's perfume was heavy, her nails long and painted red. She studied Aisha with narrowed eyes. "You are changing," Mama Stella said coldly. "You don't smile, you don't bring money like before. Tell me, what is going on?" Aisha's throat went dry. "Nothing, Ma," she whispered. Mama Stella leaned closer, her voice sharp. "If I find out you are planning to run, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. Do you understand?" Aisha nodded quickly, fear tightening her chest. She returned to her mattress, tears filling her eyes. She wanted freedom so badly, but every step toward it seemed to bring more danger. The next day, Kunle and Inspector Bamadil put their plan into motion. Bamadil sent 2 plainclothes officers to hang around near Mama Stella Street, pretending to be Okada riders. Their job was to watch, listen, and gather proof. By evening, they reported back. "Oga, it is true. Every night young girls go in and out. Men park cars, pick them, and bring them back later. We even saw one girl crying as they pushed her into a car." Bamadil nodded grimly. "Good. We need one more piece of evidence, the testimony of the girl you want to save. Connor frowned. How do we get her to talk? She's watched too closely. Bamadil thought for a moment. Tomorrow, during the day, I will send one of my female officers disguised as a customer buying provisions. She will approach the girl, gain her trust, and ask her quietly if she wants to be saved. If she agrees, we move. The plan sounded risky, but Connor agreed. The next afternoon, under the hot Ibadan sun, the female officer Sergeant Kemi walked into Mama Stella's shop pretending to buy sachet milk and biscuits. She noticed Aisha behind the counter, arranging goods with trembling hands. Kemi leaned closer, speaking softly. Are you Aisha? The girl froze. Fear flashed in her eyes. Who are you? She whispered. A friend, Kemi said quickly. Sent by the man you met near Secretariat. Mr. Connor. He wants to help you. Aisha's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she thought it was a trick. But something about the woman's calm eyes told her it was real. Yes, she whispered shakily. I want to leave. Please help me. Kemi smiled faintly and slipped her a tiny folded note. Be ready tomorrow night. Don't tell anyone. Trust us. That evening, Aisha's heart pounded so loudly she thought Mama Stella would hear it. She tucked the note deep inside her wrapper and forced herself to act normal. But Mama Stella, suspicious as always, studied her closely. You are too quiet these days, Mama Stella muttered. Remember what I said? Aisha lowered her head and nodded, though inside she was holding onto the tiny spark of hope. The next night arrived. Connor sat in his car near the junction, his palms sweaty on the steering wheel. He wasn't a police officer, but he had insisted on being part of the rescue. He couldn't just sit at home while Aisha risked everything. Inspector Bamadil's team was stationed nearby, their van parked in shadows. Sergeant Kemi was with them, ready to move. At exactly 9 p.m., the plan began. Aisha was sent out by Mama Stella with 2 other girls to stand by the roadside. The air smelled of roasted corn and exhaust fumes. Aisha's knees shook, but she remembered Connor's words, trust me. Suddenly, one of the plainclothes officers approached, pretending to be a customer. He whispered a signal to her. Now. Before she could move, one of Mama Stella's boys noticed her hesitation. What is happening there? He shouted, suspicion flaring. Panic exploded. The officer sprang into action, flashing IDs. Police. Nobody move. Chaos erupted. Mama Stella rushed out of the house, her wrapper flying, screaming at the top of her voice. Leave my girls. They are here willingly. Her boys tried to resist, but Bamadil's team overpowered them. One officer pulled Aisha quickly toward safety while others secured the compound. Connor ran forward, his heart pounding. Aisha, he called. When she saw him, tears streamed down her face. She stumbled into his arms, shaking like a leaf. For the first time in years, she felt the chains around her begin to break. But Mama Stella was not done. She screamed, you cannot take her. She owes me money. She is mine. Bamadil stepped forward, holding up the birth certificate Connor had provided. She is 19, underage when you took her. She is not your property. You are under arrest. Mama Stella fought like a wildcat, but 2 officers grabbed her and dragged her away. The other girls watched in shock, some crying, some too stunned to move. In the middle of the chaos, Aisha clung to Connor, her body trembling. Is it over? She whispered. Connor held her tightly. It's just beginning. But you're safe now. For the first time in a long time, Aisha allowed herself to believe those words. The sun rose over Ibadan with a soft golden glow, painting the city with warmth. For the first time in many years, Aisha woke up not in Mama Stella's cramped house, not on a thin mattress surrounded by fear, but in a small guest room inside a police-safe house. The sheets were clean, the air smelled of soap, and the walls were quiet. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The memories of the raid the night before still swirled in her mind, the shouting, the chaos, the moment she ran into Connor's arms. It felt unreal, like a dream she might wake from. She pinched her arm gently, and when she felt the sting of her skin, tears filled her eyes. It was real. She was free. Later that morning, Inspector Bamedil came to see her. He wore his usual stern look, but his voice was gentle. "How are you feeling?" Aisha lowered her eyes shyly. "Better, but scared." "What if Mama Stella comes back for me?" Bamedil shook his head. "She won't. She is in custody now. And this time, she will not escape. We have enough evidence to charge her for trafficking and exploitation. The law will deal with her." Relief washed over Aisha. She whispered, "Thank you, sir." But she knew deep down that her gratitude belonged even more to Connor, the stranger who had stopped his car on a rainy night and seen her as more than just a girl on the street. When Connor arrived at the safe house, carrying a small nylon bag of food and clothes, Aisha's heart lifted. He looked tired, as though he had not slept, but his eyes were warm. "You look better," he said with a small smile. Aisha smiled faintly too. "Because of you." Connor shook his head. "Because of God. I was just the vessel." The days that followed were filled with adjustments. At first, Aisha struggled to believe she was truly free. She often woke up at night sweating, expecting to hear Mama Stella's footsteps or the voices of men demanding her. But each morning, the quiet safety of the guest house reminded her that those days were behind her. Connor visited often, bringing books, food, and small gifts. He encouraged her to talk about her dreams, her hopes. At first, Aisha said she had none. Years of abuse had stripped her of imagination. But slowly, as her trust grew, she began to speak. "I used to love sewing," she confessed one afternoon, her voice soft. "Back in Soki, my mother taught me how to use needle and thread. I always dreamed of learning tailoring." Connor's eyes lit up. "Then that is where we will start. You will go back to school or to a tailoring workshop. You will build a life, Aisha. A good life." Tears pricked her eyes again. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not as a tool, not as a burden, but as a human being with potential. Weeks turned into months. With the support of the police and Connor, Aisha was reunited with her mother in Soki. The reunion was emotional. Her mother wept openly, holding her daughter tightly, refusing to let go. "I thought I had lost you forever," she cried. Aisha wept too, feeling the weight of years of pain finally lifting. It was not easy at first. Memories of Ibadan's dark nights haunted her, and shame often tried to creep into her heart. But Connor reminded her constantly, "What happened to you was not your fault. You are not dirty. You are not broken. You are a survivor." True to his word, Connor helped her enroll in a tailoring program in Ibadan. Every day, she sat behind a sewing machine, learning how to cut fabrics, stitch clothes, and design styles. For the first time in her life, she began to dream again. She dreamed of opening her own shop one day, of designing beautiful clothes, of living a life filled with dignity. The community began to notice her too. Some people whispered at first, judging her past. But as they saw her determination, her kindness, and her growing skill, they began to respect her. Little by little, Aisha's name became known not as a girl from the streets, but as a young woman rising above her scars. As for Mama Stella, justice was served. She was sentenced to several years in prison. The news spread across Ibadan, serving as a warning to others who preyed on vulnerable girls. For Aisha, hearing the verdict was like finally closing a dark chapter. She would never again have to fear that woman's shadow. One bright Saturday, months after her rescue, Kunle visited Aisha's workshop. The sound of sewing machines filled the air, and colorful fabrics were stacked neatly around the room. Aisha looked up from her work and smiled when she saw him. "Your hands are fast," Kunle said, laughing softly as he watched her stitch. "I'm learning," she replied proudly. "One day I will be the best tailor in Ibadan." "I believe you," Kunle said. There was a pause, then Aisha's voice grew quieter. "I don't know how to thank you, sir. If not for you, I would still be in that place, or dead." Kunle looked at her, his eyes full of kindness. "You don't owe me thanks, Aisha. Just live well. Live fully. That is all the thanks I need." Her heart swelled with emotion. She realized then that not all men were like the ones she had known in Momo Steller's world. There were still men with good hearts, men who wanted nothing but to lift others up. That evening, as she walked home from the workshop, the city lights of Ibadan glowed softly around her. The air smelled of fried akara and roasted plantain, the streets alive with laughter and music. For the first time in years, Aisha did not feel like a prisoner walking through the city. She felt free. She felt alive. At home, she opened her small window and looked up at the night sky. The stars glittered above, as if reminding her that even in darkness, light always shines through. She whispered a prayer of gratitude for her mother, for Kunle, for her second chance at life. She was no longer the broken girl on the street. She was Aisha, a survivor, a dreamer, a woman reborn. And this time, her story would not end in pain. It would end in hope, joy, and a future brighter than she ever imagined. It was the beginning of a new dawn. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.